Hello friends, today I'm going to talk about the poem To His Coy Mistress written by Andrew Marvell. Andrew Marvell was born in 1621 and he died in 1678. He was a poet, a satirist, a statesman and a scholar. His poems were not immensely popular at the time when he was alive, but then they gained popularity at a later age, and Charles Lamb, the essayist, played an important role in the revival of Marvell's poems in the 19th century. By the 20th century, Marvell was considered as one of the most notable poets among his contemporaries. He is now considered as one of the leading poets of the metaphysical school. Andrew Marvell's father was a clergyman, and Marvell had a promising academic career, but it was cut short by the untimely death of his father. He spent a few years abroad as a tutor and then came back to England and became the tutor of Oliver Cromwell's ward, William Dutton. And later on, he became an assistant to John Milton, who was a Latin secretary at that time in the Foreign Office. Later, he was elected as a member of parliament for the place called Hull, and he continued in that office till his death. And he was very popular as a member of parliament because he sincerely worked for the betterment of his fellow men. After the restoration of Charles II, Andrew Marvell started penning political verse satires, and he also wrote pamphlets, and he became a little bitter and he lashed at the political developments of those times. And I found an interesting sentence in an entry about the poet in Poetry Foundation, the site called Poetry Foundation, and this is the sentence about this transformation from a writer who wrote all sorts of poems. He was eclectic. All sorts of poems, love poems, religious poems. So from that, a transformation to a bitter political satirist is defined in this particular sentence. It is as if the most delicate and elusive of butterflies somehow metamorphosed into a caterpillar. So that is an interesting sentence. Anyway, he continued to wield power, and when Milton was imprisoned after the ascension of Charles II, he is said to have interceded on behalf of Milton to bring him out of the prison. And some of the famous poems of Andrew Marvell are The Garden, a Horatian ode upon Cromwell's return from Ireland, and To His Coy Mistress. And amongst these, Coy Mistress is remembered and popularized as his masterpiece. Now, coming to this particular poem titled To His Coy Mistress, it is a poem of 46 lines, and it was published in 1681 in the folio edition of Miscellaneous Poems by Andrew Marvell. This was after his death. He died in 1678. It was published in 1681. And the theme of this poem is the conventional conflict between love and time, of how the lovers are in a constant conflict with the quick passage of time, and of how they have to fight against time. They have to snatch away time, little moments of togetherness from the claws of time. So that is a very common theme, a conventional theme in Elizabethan poetry. And usually you have a lady who is very coy and trying to act very difficult to get, and there is this man, her lover, who is terribly impatient, who is aware of the passage of time, who wants to get physical with her. The woman is held back by an innate shyness and a reluctance, and the social norms that dictate that she be coy and distant. So there is this conflict, the ongoing conflict, always. Now the poem is the central theme of the poem. Now, the central theme of this poem is the carpe diem theme. Now, carpe diem, seize the day. The Latin phrase, quam minimum credula postero. I'm always afraid of mispronouncing the Latin words. I'm sure I've done that here too. So that particular phrase, it means, now this phrase, it is a Latin phrase used by the Roman poet Horace, and the idea is this, that one should enjoy one's life while one can. Enjoy the present day. Do not trust the future, because God knows what will happen in the future. So now is the only time that is at your disposal. Make the maximum of it. That's the idea of carpe diem. And that becomes the central theme of this poem. And this is not the only poem that deals with this theme. There are many poems. And generally in all these poems you see a pair of lovers, a lady who is reluctant and a man who is impatient, and the man tries to exhort and tries to force the lady to be more forthcoming with him. And the rose, the flower, the rose, was used as a frequent emblem of the brevity of physical beauty and the finality of death. So in more serious poems, like maybe the one that we are going to read now, To His Coy Mistress, we are also aware of the poignant sadness, the desperation of the pursuit of pleasures under the sentence of inevitable death. Death is after you. You have to keep running. You are going to run a kind of a failing race with death. But then, in spite of all that, let's keep running. So that idea, that also brings a sadness to your mind. So this is what is termed as the carpe diem theme. And now coming to the poem To His Coy Mistress. It is a poem of 46 lines, and it is structured in the form of a well-designed syllogistic argument. It begins with a statement of a condition or a hypothesis. Had we but, that's how he begins. That is, if we had the time. So that is the first part, a condition or a hypothesis. In the second part, we go on to the explanation. But at my back, time is there. It's pursuing me. It's pursuing us. So the explanation. And finally, we come to a conclusion, justifying his argument. Now, therefore, so this is what we should do. This being the condition, since I've told you everything, I hope you have understood. Now let's do this. So that is how it concludes. So there is, in the beginning, just as in a syllogistic argument, there is a hypothesis and then an explanation and finally a very logical conclusion. Let me just read the poem. To His Coy Mistress. Had we but world enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime. We would sit down and think which way to walk and pass our long love's day. Thou by the Indian Ganges should rubies find, I by the tide of Humber would complain. I would love you 10 years before the flood, and you should, if you please, refuse till the conversion of the Jews. My vegetable love should grow vaster than empires and more slow, and 100 years should go to praise thine eyes, and on thy forehead gaze, 200 to adore each breast, but 30,000 to the rest, an age at least to every part, and the last age should show your heart. For lady, you deserve this state, nor would I love at lower rate. But at my back I always hear Time's winged chariot hurrying near, and yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. Thy beauty shall no more be found, nor in thy marble vault shall sound my echoing song. Then worms shall try that long preserved virginity, and your quaint honour turn to dust, and into ashes all my lust. The grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. Now, therefore, while the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, and while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires, now let us sport us while we may, and now, like amorous birds of prey, rather at once our time devour than languish in his slow chapped power. Let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball, and tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. Thus, though we cannot make our son stand still, yet we will make him run. Now, the first part, or as I mentioned earlier, the part where he presents the argument or a hypothesis. So, he is talking to his lady love. It's almost, we can call this a dramatic monologue, I think. There is definitely a listener, and here it is the lady, and he has been trying to coax her into getting more close physical with him, but she is very reluctant and coy, and he's beginning to get exasperated, and he tells her, with all the control that he can muster, he tells her, had we but world enough and time, this coyness, lady, were no crime. So he says, if we had all the world and all the time available in this world, I wouldn't blame you for this coyness. Coyness is the reluctance, the refusal to touch or permit any kind of a physical closeness. So if we had all the time in the world, this coyness would not be a crime. We would sit down and think which way to walk and pass a long love's day. So he says, if we had the time, see, I'm actually in no hurry. If we had the time, I would not mind sitting here with you, and we can spend one whole day thinking about which way to walk. Should we go that side? Should we go this side? We can spend our long love's day. Thou by the Indian Ganges' side should rubies find. So you can go all the way to the distant India, and there you can wander by the shores of, by the banks of river Ganges, and look for rubies. Now this is an exaggerated picture. It's not as if the banks of Ganges were kind of sprinkled with rubies for people to pick. But then he is just exercising his imagination. He just wants to say that if we had time, I wouldn't complain even if you went away to Ganges and spend your time, or in fact what he means is waste your time looking for rubies. I would very patiently sit here by the Humber. Humber is a river in England. I would sit here, and of course I would complain, but then I would not be really angry with you, because I know that we have the time. So if we had all the time, you can go to India, I would remain here, you can spend all your time there as long as you want, finding rubies or not finding them, and I would be here sitting alone, a forlorn lover, weeping for you, missing you and complaining about your absence. I would love you 10 years before the flood. If we had all the time in the world, he says, I would have loved you 10 years before the flood. Now, which is this flood he is talking about? It is a deluge, the great flood, which is mentioned in the Bible. You remember the flood where Noah was instructed to build his ark, Noah's ark? And that was supposed to be almost 2,300 years before Christ. So long back. So if we had all the time, I would start loving you 10 years before the flood. And you should, if you please, refuse till the conversion of the Jews, and you can go on refusing me till the conversion of the Jews. Now, the conversion of the Jews, it refers to the Christian belief that on the day, on doomsday, or the last judgment, the day of the last judgment, all the Jews will be converted to Christians. And we don't know when this doomsday would come. It's a long way off. And so he says, if we had the time, you could continue to play coy, and you could go on refusing me till the conversion of the Jews, which is going to occur in some distant future. My vegetable love should grow vaster than empires and more slow. So he says, my love for you would grow. It would keep growing, growing, growing. Like what? I always think of a cauliflower. I know that's not a very romantic picture, but then when I think of this vegetable love growing, I always get this very unromantic picture of a huge cauliflower. And I request that none of you write that in your exam papers. That's just a picture, a passing picture that always comes to my mind when I read this section of the poem. Now he talks about his vegetable love. Now what is this vegetable love? Vegetable love is lust, or the love, the physical love. And there is the other love. There is also this spiritual love. And you have heard about platonic relationships between two people where it is not the body that matters, it is the heart that matters, it is the spirit that matters. So here vegetable love is definitely considered to be lesser, baser than the spiritual love. But he is very open, very frank, he is being very candid. He is telling us that his love, yes, is vegetable love. It is his body that really lusts after her. It is his lust that he finds uncontrollable. Okay, so he admits, my vegetable love should grow vaster than empires and more slow. Now this is it can be considered as an example of a hyperbole, an exaggeration of love growing big and huge, enough as big as an empire or a country. So an example of a hyperbole. And then, so if I had the time, I would allow my love to slowly grow and grow and grow in intensity. And 100 years should go to praise thine eyes. So if we had all the time in the world, I would spend 100 years to praise the beauty of your eyes alone. 100 years for your eyes and on thy forehead gaze. So I would spend 100 years describing the beauty of your eyes and your beautiful forehead, your flawless forehead. 200 to adore each breast. I would spend 200 years to adore each breast. 200 and 200, 400 years I would spend in describing and worshipping the beauty of your breasts. And I would give 30,000 years to the rest of your body. Your arms, your feet, your fingers, your lips, your nose. An age at least to every part. And the last age should show your heart. And last of all, I would reach your heart. And I would take another 100 years to describe the beauty of your heart, of your character. For lady, you deserve this state, nor would I love at lower rate. And he tells her, I am not exaggerating, because you are a very special person and you deserve this kind of adoration. And please believe me when I tell you that I would spend hundreds of years describing you and your beauty. I don't mean this in jest, but I'm very, very solemn when I speak this. Nor would I love at lower rate. And you are a kind of a woman that deserves an elevated level or an elevated scale of love. You are not meant to be loved at a lesser rate. Okay, so that is what he says in the first part, the hypothesis. If they had time, they could elaborately enjoy every moment of their love. Now what is he going to say in the second part? But here he is giving us an explanation as to why the earlier point may not really work. But at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near, and yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. And he says, but I am always, every waking moment, I am aware of time's winged chariot approaching. So in many pictorial representations you would see time as a chariot having wings. It is faster than human beings. It can reach us very fast. It can overtake us because we just have these two legs, whereas time has wings. And so he says, I am always threatened. I can always hear this ominous sound of the wings beating, the wings of time, hurrying near. And yonder, and when I look ahead of me, behind, what do I hear? I hear this fast approaching noise of the wings of time. And looking forward, what do I see? I see the deserts of vast eternity. Eternity lies spread before me, acres and acres of eternity. Or you can't even say acres and acres of eternity, measureless stretches of eternity, barren eternity, where nothing can be experienced, where no pleasure can be experienced. So that is what I see in front of me. So behind and onward, there is nothing that is attractive. Thy beauty shall no more be found, nor in thy marble vault shall sound my echoing song. And he says, very soon, once we permit time to overpower us, your beauty will be gone in no time. Your beauty will be not found anymore. And in your marble vault, what is a vault? A vault is the grave, the underground grave, or the marble kind of structure into which your body is placed once you die. So he says death will be here in no time, though he doesn't use the word death there. That is what he implies. Your beauty shall no more be found, in the sense you will be old in a matter of a few years. You will lose your beauty. All this attraction that you now have, that you now flaunt, it will be no more. In thy marble vault, nor shall in thy marble vault shall sound my echoing song. So now I sing for you. Sing in the sense I write this poetry for you. I serenade under your window. It was a practice those days of lovers to stand below the window of the lady he loves bedroom and serenade, play music, trying to win her heart. So you will not hear my song anymore in your marble vault, because by then I too would be dead. Then worms shall try that long preserved virginity. Look at that. He says worms shall try. So this virginity which you have been preserving without giving me, the beggar who has been pleading for your favors, you don't give me this beauty of yours, you don't give me the body of yours. And what's going to happen to your virginity, your long preserved virginity? Worms are going to eat into that body, and your quaint honor turned to dust. So this well guarded honor, the so-called honor that you're trying to safeguard, your quaint and strange honor that you give so much importance to, is going to be turned to dust. It's going to become insignificant, and into ashes all my lust. And what's going to happen to my lust, the lust that is burning now? It is going to be reduced to ashes. The grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. He says the grave, of course, is a very fine and private place, because you always ask for privacy. So it's definitely a private place. Nobody is going to intrude there to disturb the serenity. But let me tell you, nobody embraces in a grave, because you would be dead by then. So he is kind of applying the technique of an emotional blackmail upon this wavering mind of this lady, who wants to give in to her own passions, but at the same time is held back by many social restrictions. So he tells her that if you be coy for long, everything will be lost. Time will overpower us. You will lose your beauty. I'll lose my lust, and you will be dead and I'll be dead. We'll never enjoy the pleasure of being in each other's company. So that is the second section, where he tries to explain to her the hazards of being too coy. And then coming to the last section, he tells her, now I hope you have understood what the situation exactly is. Now let me tell you what we can do, or what is the only remaining option. Now therefore, while the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, and while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires, now let us sport us while we may. So he says, now is the right time. Your youthful hue is the color, the rosiness of youth. It still sits on your skin like morning dew. You are still young and fresh, like a flower with morning dew drops on it. And while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires, what he means there is, now your soul is willing. Your soul is also on fire like mine. So as here he says that she too definitely is in a very lustful mood, in a very romantic kind of mood. And so while you are willing, and while your body also is very willingly responding to your instincts, let us sport us while we may. So he tells his lady love, now let us sport us while we may, and now like amorous birds of prey, rather at once our time devour than languish in a slow chapped power. So he says, let us make the best of this time that is available to us, this present hour, and let us devour our time like amorous birds of prey. Birds of prey are, the birds like eagles and falcons, which are violent. And so he says, like such birds, let us devour time. Devour is to eat or consume with great desire. And so he says that let us devour time. Let us not wait for time to overpower us. Let us go and eat up time. Let us make the best use of time than languish in a slow chapped power. So time is presented as a kind of a monster with a lot of sharp teeth. And so let us not allow time to eat us up, to chew us up. Instead, languishing here means lying inactive. So let us not wait for time. Let us not give up our hope, thinking that no matter where we go, how fast we run, time will overpower us. Let us not allow that thought to defeat us. Instead of languishing in a slow chapped power, let us use this time available. Let us devour time. Let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball and tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. So he says, let us challenge time. So all our strength and all our sweetness and love, let us roll it up into one huge ball and tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. So let us throw this ball, or let us tear through in the form of a ball. You know what happens to a ball as it, like for example a snowball, as it rolls down a hill covered with snow, it grows in size because it gathers more and more snow as it rolls. And here too, let us just put in all our force and our strength and our love and our sweetness into one ball and crash through the iron gates of life. And these few lines about rolling our strength into a ball and tearing our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. So let us challenge life. Now these few lines, some critics say are a sexual innuendo because it also can be interpreted as the act of sexual intercourse. Thus, though we cannot make our sun stand still, yet we will make him run. So he says, it is true that we cannot make the sun stand still. We do not have the power to arrest the progression of time. All that we can do is we can start out on our own race. or a competition, a running competition, which is of course a race with time or with the sun. The sun symbolizes the ongoing time. The sun, it rises, it moves through the day, it sets, then the next day again it rises, the journey continues, it sets. So it is an ongoing journey. So time doesn't stop at all. We know that time doesn't stop even at night. So here, though we cannot make the sun stand still, because it is not in the power of human beings to arrest time. So let us make him run. So let's pose a challenge to him and make him run. So let us try to outrun the sun as long as we can. Let's not give up so easily. Let's make the best of life. Let us enjoy every available second of the present. The past is already gone and the future stretches in one unending stretch of eternity. So we don't know what went before, or at least we can't change what went before. We can't really predict what lies in wait ahead. The only thing available is the present. So let us not languish and waste the precious time. Let's make the best use of it. That is how he concludes the poem. And in the beginning I had mentioned that the poem is structured as a very logical kind of an argument, and by the time you reach the end of the poem, I'm sure you too will agree with me that this is structured flawlessly. There was in the beginning there were some ifs and buts, and then he gave us an explanation, and then finally he tells us, so this being the condition, this is what we are supposed to do. And by the end of the poem we are thoroughly convinced with his line of argument. So that is one meticulously designed poem, and a poem that always entertains us and never fails to convince us about the carpe diem theory. This one poem stands testimony to the greatness of Andrew Marvell as a poet, and it would continue to speak for him in ages to come.